Buenos dias. My Spanish isn't great, so the rest of the talk's going to be in English. So yeah, first up, I've got a couple of content warnings. So I have videos, and one of them has me shouting right into a microphone. So if that will have an effect on you or anything, content warnings will appear in the bottom corner. So I'm Luke Bonaccorsi. I work at Sky Betting and Gaming as a software engineer. We're an online gambling company in the north of England. I tweet at LukeB_UK. I blog and stuff at lukeb.co.uk. And I'm a hardware noob. I don't know a lot about electronics. I live in fear of burning my house down. So that should give you an idea of this stuff being sort of approachable and understandable. And I'm lazy. If there's a way I can not do something, I won't do it. And because I'm lazy, automation's fantastic, because I can do less. I can just automate the boring stuff away. And in everyday life, we're surrounded by automation. We probably don't realize it. So there's stuff like traffic lights, automatic doors, motion sensing lights, automatic hand dryers, and cash machines. And that's just the stuff I noticed today, which shows how prevalent it is in our everyday lives. It's everywhere. And as consumers, we're embracing automation more and more in our everyday lives, in our homes. So we've got heating with the Nest thermostat, or lighting with the Philips Hue bulbs, and even IKEA have a cheap set of bulbs that you can automate your lighting with, and then access control with smart door locks. And these things usually have APIs so that you can interact with them. You can write scripts and run them from the command line so you can feel like a hacker, or write a node service with a really nice dashboard that brings all your different things together, so you've got one central location that's got all your stuff. And over the past few years, there's been what I'm calling a bot uprising. They're quickly becoming a bigger and bigger part of our lives and helping us with everyday things. And these things can be built with a chat system just being the only point of call for it, or you can build use a framework for it. So Slack and Facebook Messenger and messenger systems like that have node modules so that you can easily just create a single-use bot. Or you can use a framework like Microsoft's bot framework or BotKit so that you can create one that connects to multiple different chat systems and does multiple things. And virtual assistants are becoming more and more popular. So like Siri, Alexa, and Google Assistant, they're basically bots, but a lot smarter because they're backed by these huge machine learning facilities that these companies have. And they're in our homes, and they're helping us with everyday things. So we've got like the Echo, the HomePod, and the Google Home. And they can do stuff like they can read news that you're interested in. They can play music for you. You can buy things. And the uprising's only just beginning. They're getting more and more popular every day. So in mid-2014, I started working on my own chatbot. It's called Woodhouse. It's named after the character on the TV show Archer. I was going to call it Jarvis, but then realized that it's really overdone using the name Jarvis, and it wasn't going to be anywhere near as good, so I picked a worse butler and got to Woodhouse. It's all open source, and it's written in JavaScript. It runs on Node on a Raspberry Pi behind the television in my living room. It's all MIT licensed up on GitHub, because why not? Like, feel free to have a go at it if you want. The GitHub URL's at the end. And yeah, it's there. I use it every day. It's modular and extensible. The core is just a router that has some common functionality, like broadcasting, scheduling, and preference storage. And then there are 2 types of modules. So there are plugins that do pretty much whatever you want. They do the heavy lifting for your integrations. So stuff like replying with text. If it just wants to send a message back, that's fine. Or connecting to APIs, so you can control your Nest thermostat or whatever. Or interacting directly with a piece of hardware if you got it wired up to a board. And then there are interfaces, which are ways to communicate. So these are usually chat systems. They're basically just the node modules brought in with a little bit of glue code just so that I can send and receive messages. So in the beginning, I only wanted to download movies. I was sat in a meeting at the company I used to work for with my friend Tom. He was VPN'd into his Raspberry Pi at home, queuing up movies to download, and I thought that seemed like a lot of effort. I knew of software that could download movies for me. I just wanted to be able to send it a message, and then for it to say, is this the message? Send me an IMDb link back, and I could say yes or no, and then it would go off and download it for me. Way easier. Before I did that, I ended up automating my lights. I don't know how I got to this stage. I just remember it happened, and then I go through and look at pictures from around that time. I just have a picture of the plug that I use on my desk. No idea. And so this is it working. I type a message, it turns them off. I then type another message. In a minute, and it turns them back on. And I was sat there giggling to myself when I first did this, because I was typing messages and turning off and on my lights. And as web developers or JavaScript developers, we often don't have this real-world consequence of whatever, or not consequence, real-world actions of what we do. We generally just see a button move across the screen or change color or something like that. Whereas I can control my lights by sending code. So this is the plug that I use. It's a plug that cost about £15 I got from China. I have to use an adapter with it because it's got the Chinese plug on the back. So it means it's really safe. It would actually work here because it's the same plug. I haven't tried it. I'm not going to. I don't want to burn the hotel down. I found out that you could telnet into them. You couldn't do a lot with it. But then I found a Google group that had found the SSH password. And it was only accessible locally on the network, but it meant I could get in and I could do stuff. So it runs OpenWRT, which is a router firmware. It's a Linux distribution for routers. It's got a web server on it. So this meant that I could drop scripts onto it and basically create an API. So it has an API that I hit a page with a certain parameter, and it turns the relay on. And then I hit it with a different parameter, it turns the relay off. And then there's a third parameter that can give me the status. And then I've got a separate page that I can configure some information about it. So stuff like the name of it, any tags that I want it to have so that I can group them together. And then it broadcasts this information every 2 minutes so that Woodhouse can pick it up and use it. And I use this every day, not while I'm here, but I will walk towards my house after work. If it's dark, I will send a message. And by the time I get to my front door, the lights are on. I'm not stepping on post that's been put through the door. It's done, and I don't have to fumble around for the light switch. And then I started adding other little bits. So I eventually added the TV and film downloaders, but I never used them because Netflix became a thing, and it's way easier to use Netflix. I've got stuff like checking if websites are up, or reminders for putting a pizza in the oven, and then I don't want burnt pizza, so it can tell me when the pizza's done. And then I started having all these little ideas of stuff to do with it, and I want it to control everything. Eventually, it will. And it'll probably lock me in the house, and that won't be a good thing. But instead, I started to rewrite it. It was a mess. I'd just been through it. I got really excited about it and was just like, what if I could do this? What if I could do this? And made a horrible, horrible code base. And I'm sure a lot of you have probably had that thing where you've gotten really excited about doing something and then gone back 6 months later and what is this? But it meant that because I'd gotten to that point, I knew how everything worked. I could build it really modularly to make it a lot more nice to work with. I could use ES6 because Node had adopted that stuff by that point. And it all just works because I just upgraded the version of Node, and it worked. And the first time I gave a version of this talk, back in November 2016, I wanted to do something new with it. So I automated my curtains. So I send a message, and they open, and that's... they're kind of loud. I don't think if this has put the sound for it very well. But yeah, it's a bit creepy looking. I don't know what it looks like from the outside, if it's just like, yeah. I don't use this so much. So this is the hardware for it. It's really, really simple. It's a plastic box I bought from a supermarket, a servo, some string I bought on eBay, some plastic wheels I bought on eBay, and then some hardware to put it onto the curtain rail that I got from a DIY shop. The string sits in a loop above the curtains, and then whichever way it rotates, the curtains are attached to the string, so if it rotates clockwise, it'll open them. If it rotates counterclockwise, it'll close them. It's kind of not great, but it worked. It proved my idea. And then the actual hardware brain part of it is this device, which is an ESP8266. It's a microcontroller like an Arduino, but it's got Wi-Fi. It costs a couple of pounds from China again. And there's a firmware called Mongoose OS that you can flash onto it that means you can write JavaScript. And to automate my curtains, it was 75 lines of JavaScript. And that had endpoints for opening, closing, and giving me the status, a configuration page, and broadcasting so that Woodhouse could pick it up. And then there's so much cool stuff for doing JavaScript and hardware together. So I mentioned Mongoose OS, but then there's Johnny 5 and Cylon.js, which work on Arduinos and Raspberry Pis, and I think generally you need them, or for at least the Arduinos, they have to be tethered to a computer. But it means you can run JavaScript on a hardware thing. Or if you can get development boards that have them built in, so there's stuff like the Esperinos and the Tessel boards. And they might be a little bit more expensive, but it's kind of worth it to have that first-class experience. And then there's loads more stuff on the web. I've seen a load more pop up, and I can't remember the names of them, but if you Google JavaScript hardware, you'll probably find a lot. And it makes it really easy to dive in if you already know JavaScript, because it removes that barrier of, I don't know the language to do it. It's now just, I don't know how hardware works. And then I got bored, Christmas 2016, and started shouting at my laptop. And it wasn't out of frustration. It was for voice control. And the sound isn't coming out the speakers. I can hear it through there, but it's not coming out the speakers. No? Okay. Oh, that's coming out display audio. If you just change that to... Sorry about this. It worked in the... there we go. Right. Let's try that again.
Woodhouse.
There we go.
Turn off lamps.
Chair lamp has been turned off. TV lamp has been turned off. Couch lamp has been turned off.
Woodhouse. Turn on lamps.
Chair lamp has been turned on. TV lamp has been turned on. Couch lamp has been turned on.
So it's got the worst reply voice ever. I used to run Linux, and that was the default voice in a program called Festival, which is a text-to-speech software on Linux. I've not tried it since. I'm now on Windows, so it might probably sound better. Mac, it probably sounds really nice because they put effort into that stuff. So it has an offline hot word, so that it's not constantly listening to me. I can shout the word Woodhouse and it will recognize that word. It also does it when the TV show is played at it, so I'm not sure if that's the best thing to do. But that uses a thing called Snowboy. You go on their website, you say the word 3 times, and it'll give you a model to download to drop into your project. And then for the main part of it, I use the Google Speech API because you get 60 minutes free a month, batched into 15-second increments. You could use Azure or Amazon instead, but the reason I offload it to an API like that is they have a lot more data than I'll ever have, and it just makes sense. I tried using some open source ones, and it never made any sense. But then it sends the text that it translates to the main hub of Woodhouse, and then that can carry out the actions. So all these units, all this software does the actual translation. Eventually, I'll have Raspberry Pi scattered around my house for this, with microphones and speakers, when I finally actually get around to doing that. So you've probably heard of Nest. I mentioned it earlier in the talk. I'm going to introduce a brand new entry into the smart heating arena. It's called Set. It's revolutionary. It's JavaScript based. It's a Wi-Fi enabled thermostat. It's got incredible timeless design. It's beautiful. It's crafted from the finest plastic that I could get out my 3D printer. It has the ability to boost and pause the heating. It's got a minimum temperature setting. And it's got an API so that I can interact with it. It's all controlled by Woodhouse because why wouldn't I? This doesn't make a lot of sense to other people, but it makes sense to me. I'm not a UX designer. So this is what the thermostat used to look like in my old house. I live in rented properties at the minute, and this is what it came with. It wasn't accurate, so when I'd set it to like 18 degrees, it would never actually reach 18 degrees, it'd just be colder than that. But I found that you could pull the plastic wheel off that gave you the numbers, and it has a potentiometer behind it with a little notch. So I 3D printed a wheel that would sit on that notch, and that wheel attaches to a servo, and then I 3D printed a case to hold all the parts. So the unit sits on top of that thermostat, with the wheel attached to that black potentiometer. It's got a schedule on it, and then it checks the temperature every couple of seconds and makes the decision whether it should turn on or off the thermostat. And then it just literally, with the servo, turns the potentiometer to the maximum temperature or the minimum temperature so that it can turn it on or off. The parts for it are this. It's not massively complex. I found all this on the internet because I'm not great at hardware. There's an ESP8266, as I mentioned earlier, with my curtains, again with Mongoose OS on it. It's got a temperature sensor so that it can read the current temperature, a resistor because the internet told me I needed one, and then a servo to turn the dial. And this ran my heating over winter. I even went away for a week and was like constantly messaging Woodhouse to make sure that my house hadn't like frozen. It worked. The best test is the one that scares you the most, I guess. But it made it really easy to control it and see what it was. If it needed, I could turn it on. But I plan on making it smarter. I want it to be a bit more predictive so that it's not just going like, it's 5 o'clock, I'm going to turn it on so that when I actually get home at 6, the house will be warm. So that's the story so far. But it's only just the beginning. In the future, I have so many plans. I want to do so much stuff. I moved house a couple of months ago, and I don't have curtains in my new house. I have blinds, and I want to control those. And the thermostat's different, so the one that I just showed won't work in my new house. I have to do some RF hacking, which is going to be interesting. And then I want to add a third module type of data providers so that I can have light sensors and temperature sensors around the house to give me information and do actions based on that with a recipe system like IFTTT. So my phone can connect to the network, and if it's dark outside, I can turn on the lamps and close my blinds. And then I want to do like natural language processing so that I can actually have it be a bit smarter. If you listened when I was doing the voice control stuff, I was very specific about the words that I said, and it didn't sound natural. It was Woodhouse turn on lounge lamps. It'd be so much nicer if I could say Woodhouse turn on the lounge lamps so that it just feels more conversational. And then I want to have a unit in my car, not to control the car because that's a terrible idea, but so I can do stuff like controlling the music and actually reaching out to the central instance. And then more hardware. I've really enjoyed doing the hardware things. As much as I don't know about it, it's been fun. So stuff like door locks and light switches, I'd love to have a go with. And I'm genuinely terrified by the prospect of home ownership, not because of having a mortgage and having to be a grown-up and responsible adult, but because I'll probably burn it down, and I don't want to burn down my own house. So at the start of this talk, I said I was lazy. I need to correct that. I'm the ridiculous kind of lazy where I'll spend hundreds and hundreds of hours building things so that I don't have to do simple little tasks, like turning on my lights, closing my blinds or my curtains. I'm basically the personification of this XKCD, where I will just spend forever doing something when it would have been much, much quicker just to do the thing. But it goes further than that. I'm not just here just show off all the cool stuff I've built. I've hopefully inspired you to have a go at doing some hardware things. It's really cool. It's not as scary as it seems to be. And I've learned so much whilst doing this stuff. I've learned a lot about JavaScript itself. It's my first actual instance of using ES6 when I started converting it. I've learned some bits about UDP and some bits about hardware. And every time I found a thing that was interesting, I would delve deeper into it. I would get more information. I'd keep going. I even bought a 3D printer because of this. And I printed the case for my thermostat with that. And it makes prototyping things much easier. It'll mean that any future things I want to do, it'll be way easier. And if one of my other passions is cooking and food. So I realized a great parallel when I started working on this talk, that if you were to learn to cook, you would do it with things that you actually wanted to eat. You wouldn't make food that you don't like because it's pointless. And it's the same with when you're learning code. If you want to actually get into it, have a go with something that's really interesting to you. It may be weird to everyone else, but it doesn't matter. It keeps you invested. It means that you can hack it, you can cut corners, you can refactor it if you need to. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to get a point across. You're building it for yourself. You don't have to share it, but if you do, people will probably be interested. I never thought anyone would be interested in my weird home automation setup, but there's a group of a lot of people sat here. So that's everything. The repo for Woodhouse is down at the bottom. It's github.com/Woodhouse. I tweet at LukeBUK, blog at lukeb.co.uk, and I have other things on my own GitHub page, including the thermostat code. So thank you very much.